So, yeah, I wanted to do some, well, not really level grinding, but more like job point grinding in Final Fantasy V, and didn't find time all week. So, yeah, I think I'm going to do that this week. Also, do the level grinding I need in Thousand Arms because this week is seeing the end of um, Mission Impossible. So, yeah, I should get that done. But, I want to do something in between. And I've only seen a few episodes of the cartoon. Yeah, that was done by, I believe, Deke. I read the books, mostly. Um, I think I read about 10 of them, and there's something like 19 of them written. Um, so, yeah. This game that I'm going to be doing is Tales of Redwall Escape the Gloomer. Um, yeah, I just looked for Redwall desktops, and this is one that came up, and I was just like, okay, that's going to be my backdrop. It's probably also going to be one of my uh, desktop rotations. Okay, yeah, so I remember downloading a unfinished build of a Redwall platformer that used a lot of elements from the Nilvani cartoon, um, but it was very incomplete. uh, I might have that in a whole old hard drive. I might bring it out at some point, but maybe not. Since then, there have been two games that have been released. This one, which is Escape the Gloomer, which is a text-based adventure, which really fits with the whole, book series thing. And also, there's another Redwall game that is this stealth-based game. Now, when I first heard about that, I thought that whoever was in charge of making games for this saw Ghost of a Tale and thought, we can do a Redwall version of that. But no, apparently the sneaky mouse game first was a Redwall game, and 2 years later, Ghost of a Tale came out. Ghost of a Tale is also a game I want to do on my channel at some point, but that'll be a while. God, I've got a lot of games where I'm just like, there's a game I want to put on my channel at some point. But for now, let's start up The Lost Legends of Redwall Escape the Gloomer. Best played with headphones. Okay. Now, I don't hear any sound. Hopefully that won't be a big problem. It'll start up. There we go.
Strike me rudder, matey.
All
Welcome
right.
to the Lost Legends of Redwall Escape the Gloomer, a conversational adventure game in 9 chapters by Scott Adams and the
Not that
Clovis
Scott
team.
Adams.
A parallel tale to the Mossflower story, in association with Soma Games, Penguin Random House, and Redwall Limited Company.
Also, strike me rudder, matey. That sounds very intimate. Best used with headphones. I don't know, and it's a text-based adventure, so I imagine sound isn't too key. That said, so when Brian Jakes wrote Redwall initially, it was while he was working with a school for the blind. So that's why if you've ever read a Redwall book, a lot of detail goes into things like sound, smell, taste, etc. It one helps, because if you tell someone who's never seen red that something's red, that doesn't mean much. But if you want to start describing like the smells of baking bread and stuff like that, that is something that the audience would be familiar with. So yeah, that I always found kind of fascinating. But yeah, let's try this out.
The automatic hint feature is active. To have a more challenging experience, enter automatic hint to adjust the feature at any time.
We'll probably be turning that off. I have never played this game, and I don't even have a walkthrough open up. I want to do this legit, because I'm expecting this is going to be made for like 6 to 10-year-olds, and I'm nearly 40. I want to pretend that I'm smarter than a 4th grader. I could not be. I should be able to suss this out.
Prologue.
Okay.
His muscle and sinew lay wasted under the tawny fur that covered his big, tired body. The face was that of a wildcat who had survived many battles. The pointed ears stood above a tracery of old scars that ran from crown to whiskers. He had fearsome yellowed teeth, and the green barbarian eyes still alight with strange fires. His paws beat heavily against the stone as he descended. His withered paws opened the chest he had brought down with him. He pulled the pouch from its robe, placed it inside, and raised the heavy chain from his neck. He held the amulet to his brow, fondly admiring it for several moments before he laid it next to the pouch and closed the chest.
We've got a
Beneath
pause.
the grub, beneath the cells, present where insanity dwells.
Okay. So we got this amulet. Cool. And audio, narration, environmental sound effects. Ooh, pause sound when minimized. Nice. Extras. Resume game, delete player. Shouldn't do that. Auto hints. Let's turn that off. And artwork. Well, we've got one piece of artwork. Let us resume game. Also, how is the text looking for you guys? Because this has a font size changer. So if you guys ever say, hey, could you make the text bigger? I can actually do that. So let's start chapter 1. Okay, so this isn't fully narrated. Maybe it is.
Chapter 1.
It is.
Meet Gillig.
Okay.
Gillig the otter was armed with his trusty sling, which was a long-distance weapon favored by otters. He tightly anchored his rope to a huge ballista boulder and descended down the cliffside into the entrance of the abandoned otter halt called Otter's Den.
All right.
He set about his first task, to find a way into Cotir Castle. Skipper's words of advice echoed through his mind. You'll find the secret entrance all right, matey. You just need to look. What will Gillig do? This is what you must now decide.
Okay.
Try exploring and doing things with what you discover around you, and check your belongings to see what you have. Use full sentences starting with an action verb like enter, examine, take, feel, etc. You can ask for a hint or a summary at any time. You can't lose in this game, so feel free to experiment and have fun.
Okay, so this does not have Sierra game logic, so there is no deaths, which is good for children, but I don't know. Deaths might have been funny, but okay. What will Gillig do? How about we smell the air?
Gillig smelt nothing special as he sniffed around.
All right.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt. He pondered what else might he discover by looking around and then closely examining things he found.
Okay. Look in pack. Don't have a pack. We also have a new art piece here. Cute. Look around.
The young otter narrowed his eyes and peered into the
Probably
collapsing
inventory,
halt.
yeah.
The sunlight pierced only a short distance into the halt. All else was swallowed by the darkness. Gillig, taking a quick glance around the room, noticed there wasn't much to look at except for a pile of rubble within only a few paws' length of him.
Examine the rubble.
Gillig stepped into the halt carefully, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. He scanned the rubble, which was filled with wood, rocks, and even a skull of some unknown beast.
Uh-oh.
His eyes stared fixedly at a peculiar piece of wood. It was long and wrapped at one end. Gillig thought it looked like an ancient wooden torch that was worth taking. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Take ye torch. Ye is beyond my comprehension. I have no idea what that is. Yeah. Take torch.
Gillig grabbed the torch's handle and gave a quick, powerful tug. The otter collapsed backwards, still clutching the ancient torch, as a cloud of dust burst into the air from the collapsing rubble pile. Gillig climbed back to his feet and waved the dancing cloud of dust from his face. Everything around him was bright and fuzzy, his eyes fixed on the swirls of air parading in the breeze. Time stood still as he dreamily smiled at the memory of the day before, surrounded by the joyous feasting of woodlanders in Brock Hall. Martin the warrior, accompanied by Gonf, the prince of mouse thieves, Skipper, the leader of the otters, and other woodlanders were billeted at Brock Hall, where meal times were like a constant feast. The woodlanders began passing food. As Skipper ate, Martin told him of Gingerveer. The wildcat was kindly disposed towards the woodlanders and locked away in the cells deep beneath Cotir by his wicked sister, Queen Sarmina. During his recent captivity in the dungeons, Martin recalled Weasel Guard's chatter of the late Lord Verduga's scroll of inheritance, which had vanished upon his death. The scroll, the guard suspected, would have named Gingerveer the rightful heir, and not Sarmina. Martin cleaned the October ale from his whiskers.
Cotir is not easily infiltrated. But if there's a chance that scroll exists, we must have it.
Skipper raised an eyebrow as he quickly gulped the rest of his famous hot root punch. Strike me colours, and I've got just the otter for the job. Gillig shook himself free of his thoughts of the past. The swirling dust cloud had finally cleared. Sunlight overflowed into the room, revealing more of the halt. He looked around now with torch in paw. If he could just find a way to light it.
Could be.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying an ancient unlit torch, a sling. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Okay, so I don't have much of anything else. Let's look at rocks.
He wanted to look at something, but it was either not visible to him, or he could not find anything about it.
Okay,
Gillig
so
was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
there are no flints or anything like that. Enter hold.
Gillig thought about entering the otter's den known as a halt, but quickly realized he was already there.
Oh, okay.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of an ancient, ruined otter halt. From where he stood, the den looked completely abandoned and desolate. The den was lit by rays of bright sunlight that streamed in from the open entrance, thus causing the stirred-up dust motes to glow like strange fireflies. Hanging just outside the entrance and within reach was the end of the rope he had used to climb down into the decaying otter's den. There was a tall, unstable-looking pillar of rubble going up to the rocky ceiling. Visible was a number of rubble-packed doorways which were impassable without the help of a mole. Yet there was one doorway which hadn't collapsed. It led into a dark, foreboding tunnel.
Of course. How about I get the rope?
Gillig reached for the rope hanging outside the halt entrance. His better judgment told him that it would be best for it to remain there, so he could leave after he was done with his mission. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Well, Gillig is certainly smarter than some adventure game protagonists I know. How about I... to open door?
Gillig had a thought, but he had no idea how to do it. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt. Gillig tried to open the door, but there was no door where he was. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
You mentioned a bunch of doors. I can't say exits like most other of these kind of games. Alright, lock.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of an ancient, ruined otter halt. From where he stood, the den looked completely abandoned, desolate. The den was lit by... With confidence on his shoulders, Gillig walked into the dark tunnel. A sense of foreboding hung over him as he stepped through its many twists and turns until he could no longer see where he was going. Everything was pitch black ahead, but Gillig felt certain he could leave the tunnel.
Okay. Nothing was visible.
Straining to see, nothing was visible, and the awful darkness was unbroken.
Listen.
Gillig listened closely, but did not hear anything.
Okay. Floor?
Through sense of touch, Gillig investigated the darkness and picked up something he found. He planned to check his belongings later.
Ooh.
Gillig carefully made his way back out of the tunnel to the brightly lit entrance of the halt.
Let's see what I found.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying an ancient unlit torch, a fire-starting kit, a sling. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Light torch.
Gillig was ready to light the torch, but he needed to decide what to light it with.
Light torch.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Starting kit.
Gillig took everything from the fire-starting kit and lit the torch. After doing so, the remaining bits of the ancient kit were finally exhausted, and it crumbled away.
Okay, finally. Enter tunnel.
He walked through the open doorway. As Gillig clutched his lighted torch, he gave a huge sigh of satisfaction now that he was able to see in the dark tunnel. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance.
Okay, let's enter outer space.
Gillig wanted to enter some place, but he did not know where he needed to go.
Enter space.
Gillig wanted to enter some place,
okay,
but he did not know where he needed to go. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Go down tunnel.
He moved forward slightly, but he hadn't decided where he wanted to go. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Salmon tunnel.
Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance.
Salmon space.
Gillig was in a twisty tunnel
Oh.
lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance.
Salmon walls.
The wall had solid features. Nothing was going to break through it. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Smell
Gillig
air.
smelt nothing special as he sniffed around.
Feel walls.
Gillig felt row upon row of hard, jagged, and curved rocks which filled the walls. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Kick rocks.
Gillig picked up a nearby rock from the rubble. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel. Gillig tried to take another rock, but he could carry no more than one rock at the time. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Apparently, inventories are, yeah. Okay. Yep, one rock per otter. And, you know, he can lie on his back and pass it in between paws, and it's adorable. How about we go back to the entrance?
Gillig carefully made his way back out of the tunnel to the brightly lit entrance.
Let's
He
examine the
closely
skull.
examined the skull and guessed that it was the skull of a hare. At least it looked very similar to a hare. Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Take the
He
skull.
tried to take something, but he was not able to get it.
Oh.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. Okay. Can I climb rope?
Gillig reached for the rope hanging outside the halt entrance. His better
Oh,
judgment
okay.
told him that it would be best for it to remain there, so he could leave after he was done with his mission.
Yeah.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of the halt.
Room.
Gillig was in the entrance chamber of an ancient, ruined otter halt. From where he stood, the den looked completely abandoned and desolate. The den was lit by rays of bright sunlight that streamed in from the open entrance, thus causing the stirred-up dust motes to glow like strange fireflies. Hanging just outside the entrance and within reach was the end of the rope he had used to climb down into the decaying otter's den. There was a tall, unstable-looking pillar of rubble going up to the rocky ceiling. He was in front of a dark, foreboding tunnel doorway, which was big enough. He walked through the open doorway. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space. Gillig had a thought, but he had no idea how to do it. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel. Gillig wanted to enter some place, but he did not know where he needed to go. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel.
Okay. Yep. Uh. Use or with may not be the first word.
Gillig had a thought, but he had no
Nope.
idea how to do it. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel. Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space.
Look, space.
Gillig was in a twisty tunnel lined with rubble. At one end, the tunnel ended at a wide open space, and the other way went back to the entrance.
Move onward. Move
He had
on.
an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig knew there had to be a way out. He thought about going to the open space that the tunnel led to and
Yes!
see what else the halt was hiding. Gillig slowly walked down the slightly dim path ahead, letting his thoughts wander to the day at the River Moss when the woodlanders
said
fought for their lives. Inside the walls of Cotir Castle, the vermin ruler sat in her chamber and summoned her aid.
Listen carefully.
The evil queen Tarmina Greeneyes purred. The vile feline had an idea that would crush the peaceful woodland creatures.
I want you to go back to Cotir and bring the Gloomer here to Revamos.
Far beneath Cotir Castle, there was an underground cavern and a great lake. The only one who went down to the lake was the guard who was detailed to feed the Gloomer. He would take down the refuse from the barracks, leaving it a respectable distance from the post to which Gloomer's long chain was attached at the lake's edge. Verduga, the father of Gingerveer and Tarmina, had captured Gloomer and brought him to Cotir long ago. The monster water rat was robbed of normal sight after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake. It had little hearing and no speech at all. None of this mattered while it still possessed the instincts of touch and smell. The Gloomer was a killer, savage and mindless, particularly when there was fresh meat to be had. At the Woodlanders' Camp Willow, within the waters, something was beginning to come forward. A long shape, like a section of tree trunk, smooth, with a many-spiked dorsal fin emerged. Skipper leaned forward and patted the giant pike's fin. Listen, mate. That big pussycat may have a Gloomer, but us otters got a stormfin. Gillig's thoughts were broken as he walked into the large open space. Gathering his wits, he pondered what else might he discover by looking around and then closely examining things he found.
Thanks. Okay, so let's discuss this. So yes, the Gloomer, who is apparently suffers from both blindness and albinism from not getting enough vitamin D from actual sunlight, and also apparently has mental problems. So essentially the great monster in this place is someone who has been heavily abused. Yeah, there's stuff that has been written as recently as 20 years ago that, yeah, I'm kind of glad that we all kind of look at that and go, read a lot of Redwall books as a kid and got to meet the author at one point. And yeah, at one point he was like, I like to write stories about how the goodies are always good and the baddies are always bad. And it always goes in line with species, which, considering how each species is their own little microculture, is kind of like, I'm writing stories that tell you that you're really fine to be racist against someone. And it's like, oh, I understand that you're writing like, you know, you're trying to write old-fashioned sort of fairy tales with absolutism in morality and the like. But even Tolkien, when asked about the orcs, was like, yeah, even the orcs can be a good person if they were given all of the, the raising that they could have, because Lord of the Rings, the orcs were people were elves that were corrupted by Sauron to become his own personal army, so they were essentially an entire race beaten into savagery. Like, not what white people call, savagery, like real savagery, kind that white people do. Anyway, I should probably stop talking about this. This Twitch stream has now ended.
Congratulations, you are making progress in creating your story. Notice the paw print's progress bar light up. The sound you hear next will play at each new accomplishment.
Yay. Gillig's thoughts were broken as he walked in a large open space. Gathering his wits, he pondered what else he might discover by looking around and then closely examining the things he found. Okay. Well, let's see here. Look around in space.
Gillig was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble.
Mm-hmm.
Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel.
Okay.
Gillig strained his eyes in the darkness, but could only see a little above his head on the walls by the light of the flickering torch. Just barely visible, scratched above on a wall, was a riddle.
No.
Playful otters we may be, but fighters fierce upon the sea. Clang the target up above to find the fun that otters love. Strangely, there was no target in sight. Glancing around, he saw a ring of stones around a blackened pit.
Okay. Salmon pit.
Gillig examined the blackened pit and saw the evidence of numerous fires. There was nothing remaining in the fire pit that could be burned. The otters who once occupied the halt had more than enough wood for a large fire that would light the whole room for feasts. The stones circling the pit were set deeply into the solid floor. Some looked a little cracked from the constant heating and cooling they had undergone.
So
Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
I need to find wood to create a fire. Okay. Look for wood.
Gillig examined the wood scraps.
Yay!
They seemed worn out and good fuel for burning. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Put wood scraps in pit.
He was about to drop the wood scraps, but realized he did not have any.
Take
Through the
wood
dim light of the
scraps.
torch, Gillig collected some wood scraps from the rubble. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features. Gillig dropped the wood scraps he was carrying into the fire-blackened pit. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Pit with torch.
Gillig tossed the torch into the fire pit and stood back as the fire roared to life. He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as the firelight flickered and danced in the fire pit. Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel. High above the fully exposed riddle was a small round target. Down to the rabbits we will go, through the bunny burrow below. They flee from us and hide their food, but we'll bring 'em for hullabaloo. Playful otters we may be, but fighters fierce upon the sea. Clang the target up above to find the fun that otters love. Glancing around, he saw a fire pit with a burning fire in it. Gillig could not take his mind off the meaning of the riddle. His eyes furrowed at the memory of the day before. At the first light of dawn, Skipper met with Gonf and Gillig. Gonf, this here is Gillig, the otter
Hi! Pleased to meet you, matey.
Gonf excitedly shook Gillig's paw. The young otter gave a bewildered look to Skipper, who merely laughed. Now why don't you tell the lad what you told me? The mouse balladeer quickly responded in song. The Prince of Mouse Thieves knows a way to get into Cotier today. The Gloomer who's guarded it so, no longer a reason not to go. Within the abandoned hold you'll take a slide to depths, direct to lake. Oh, just find the otter's bunny burrow and you'll know what to do. The mouse thief grinned from ear to ear. Gillig shook himself free of his thoughts of the past. He suddenly jumped, realizing perhaps he could find the bunny burrow the mouse thief had sung about, and maybe even the scroll itself.
Probably darker and a bit more tobacco worn, but also, fun fact, the author's insert character is actually Knopf. Now, let's see here. And to the rabbits we go through the bunny burrow below. That's the tunnel that I think we're right over. That's full of water. Flee from us and hide their food. We'll bring them for Hullabaloo, which, this is a children's book, but medieval time, that would be, play about may be, but fighters fierce upon the sea, clang target up above, find the fun that otters love. So, place stone and sling.
Gillig loaded a smooth pebble into the sling and was ready to fire it. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Sling pebble at target.
With a stone in his sling, Gillig shot at the target, hitting it perfectly in the center. The stone ricocheted off with a clang and landed in the rubble. A heavy thump sounded in his ears, erupting from the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Well, let's take a stone again, because we
Gillig
only take
picked up
one.
a nearby rock from the rubble. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Okay. Salmon room.
He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as the firelight flickered and danced in the fire pit. Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance and a bubbling spring streaming into a short tunnel. High above the fully exposed, the floor had a hole no larger than an otter's paw, from which a slow stream of water bubbled endlessly. The spring water flowed into the entrance of the short tunnel. Gillig remembered the loud thump he had heard in the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Listen for the thump.
Gillig listened closely and heard the sound of the fire burning in the room with him. Gillig was in a large open area. Gillig smelt nothing special as he sniffed around. Gillig was in a large open area.
Sam in the hole.
He was in a large cavernous hall filled with rubble. Bright light glowed around the room as the firelight flickered and danced in the fire pit. Nearby was the twisty tunnel that led back to the entrance, and above the shallow stream bubbled from the spring and flowed into the short tunnel of the fire pit room. It looked just large enough for Gillig to walk into. Gillig remembered the loud thump he had heard in the short tunnel. Gillig was in a large open area with many interesting features.
Enter short tunnel.
Gillig stepped through the water and entered the short tunnel. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
Look around.
Gillig was in the short tunnel which led to a dead end. He was surrounded by pitiful rockwork which went up to the ceiling. Water flowed from the spring in the fire pit room into the tunnel and emptied into a large pool of water in the floor.
Examine the pool.
Gillig examined the pool closer and saw that it was as large around as a fully grown badger.
Oh.
Even as it was constantly fed, it was still full of water and had not overflown. Gillig was at the end of a very short tunnel.
Let's see, let's jump into pool.
Gillig leaped down into the pool and swam powerfully through the water. The otter skillfully navigated the winding underwater path and swam upward to the surface. He climbed out of the water. Gillig shook his head. A slow smile played on his lips.
Oh, okay. So I'm in a new place. Round.
Gillig was in the otter's bunny burrow. It was
Oh,
lit by a
my.
metal mirror high up on the wall that cleverly reflected the light of the fire pit through holes in the rock walls.
Ah,
A
okay.
steady stream of water flowed from the drain hole he had come from and emptied into a large downward slanting hole in the floor. Bees droned fuzzily around a large beehive nested above it. Against one wall was a nest full of unhatched snake eggs.
Ugh.
Gillig shuddered when he saw them. Above the drain hole was a wooden drain cover that was connected by a rope coming out of the wall. He had caused it to open when he had hit the target in the fire pit room. On the floor was a coil of rope, and near it there was a large metal ring that was attached to the rocky wall. On a side wall was a large wooden sign dangling from a single wire.
Well, read the sign.
Looking at the sign, Gillig read in an older, archaic otter dialect.
Hark me, hearty. Make a stern rope fast to this ring afore you visit the old soft bellies down below.
Gillig was in the otter's bunny burrow.
Okay. Well, let's grab the coil of rope.
Gillig moved about, gently making his way forward. He did not notice the swarm of angry bees had erupted from the hive until too late. They hovered over him, looking grim and vengeful. He smiled impudently, aware from the sight of his sticky fur he had accidentally brushed the beehive. In the silence that followed, he backed slowly, holding both paws out with an air of innocence. The bees began to attack him. Gillig swatted furiously as the maddened mass forced him flailing around the room. He tumbled over the coil of rope and struggled to extricate himself. Tossing and swiping about, the young otter had fallen over backward and slid into the hole as the rope and beehive trailed behind him. Gleefully, Gillig slid down the water slide. As the young otter played on the slide, he recalled that day at the River Moss, the clash between Gloomer the great rat and Stormfin the enormous pike. Skipper released the giant pike called Stormfin. The pike rushed through the sluice gate, creating a miniature tidal wave as he travelled. Swift chevrons of water rippled out to both sides of the bank as Stormfin sped downstream like a great arrow. Gloomer thrashed the water as he swam upstream, feeling his prey getting near. The onlookers on the bank saw a spout of water shoot high like a geyser as the combatants crashed together. Stormfin rose clear of the river, swishing his tail in a mighty leap. He launched himself back into the water like a downward torpedo with gaping teeth. Gloomer was waiting. The surface boiled in a welter of cascading water, shimmering scales, and ragged fur. The whole scene streaked with blood. Stormfin thwacked away at Gloomer's injured side with his heavy tail like a stout paddle. He had severed Gloomer's tail and was tearing ferociously at the rat's hindquarters.
Oh.
Stormfin's jaws clamped tight and dragged the rat backward, down into a deep pit beneath the bank. The watchers on the bank saw Gloomer's front claws emerge wildly from the water, grasping at thin air before they vanished beneath the surface. The destroyer from Cotir was beaten. Stormfin had finally won. Gillig sighed with relief, knowing he would never have to worry about meeting the vile Gloomer. Suddenly, the water slide ended, and Gillig found himself tumbling downwards in the air, head over rudder, through a large, dark space. The fall was quickly broken as he splashed down into a dark body of water.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Congratulations! You have unlocked your first achievement.
Chibos.
They're just special little things in the game for players to find or do. They're just for fun, and are not needed to complete the game.
Uh-huh. Achievement unlocked. Novice Explorer.
A badger lord appeared in Gillig's thoughts, his soft voice like the whisper of an owl's wingbeat in the night sky, proclaiming that you have earned the achievement title of Novice Explorer.
Oh, no problem there, Trappist. Hope you're doing okay. Well, let's start Chapter 2. That doesn't look like meat cute. And that would be from the book Mossflower.
Chapter 2. Meet Gloomer. A few days previously, the destroyer from Cotir was beaten. Stormfin had finally won. Or had he? Deep within the cold, dark depths of the river Moss, and unknown to the triumphant Stormfin, the sorely wounded Gloomer quickly squirmed into a tight crevice in the rocky walls of the bank. Instinctively huddling into it to escape the fury of Stormfin, he pushed into the rough, narrow, water-filled tunnel, one just large enough for him, but not the gigantic pike. Safe from the gigantic pike, Gloomer swam up the narrow hollow until he broke through the water with a heaving gasp. Each deep breath echoed harsh against the surrounding stone, informing him that he was in a small cavern. The smells of his fur soaked in blood intruded into his nostrils, and the agony of his legs was more than the beast could bear. His vision was blurred, unable to distinguish anything aside from the light and darkness from the faint phosphorescent glows that filled the room. The room reeled as Gloomer attempted to center himself while he floated in the water. With all his might, he desperately began to search for a way out. Gloomer was floating in some water. Now you play as Gloomer the Great Rat. He is yours to command as you work to rescue him from the cave.
Okay.
He was floating at the surface in a pool of water within a small, faintly glowing cave. Gloomer could see the glow all around him. Everything else was dim and fuzzy to the nearly blind Great Rat.
Smell air?
Gloomer sniffed around and smelt Stormfin in the water. To make matters worse, there was an overpowering smell of serpents nearby. Gloomer was floating in some water.
Swim to shore.
Gloomer swam around and bumped into a ledge just at head height. The accomplishment sound as Gloomer is a bit different.
A bit different.
Gloomer was floating in some water. Gloomer tried to get some water, but it
Oh.
ran through his paws. Gloomer desperately searched for a way to get out of the water and away from the hungry pike. Gloomer was floating in some water.
Climb ledge.
Gloomer winced in frustration
go.
as he slowly paddled forward. He floundered through the water as his tail was no longer able to aid his balance.
Nope.
Within a paw's length of Gloomer, the top of his head bumped into a solid ledge. Exerting all his strength, the exhausted fighter heaved himself onto the rock ledge. Gloomer's nose twitched. The smell of several serpents wafted from the ledge into his nostrils. The great rat could feel the many vibrations in the rock as it slithered closer to him.
Uh-oh.
The fearsome monster quickly attacked the water snake.
Hey, tail
Though the
gnomes.
savage was greatly weakened after his battle with Stormfin, the snake was no match for the great rat. He took a mighty swipe at the large snake, forcing it to retreat to the wall. Sounds of younger hisses filled his ears, and without regard to his wounds, the wrath of the maddened beast was upon them. Silence fell upon the cavern. Finally, exhausting the last of his strength, Gloomer fell into a deep sleep. When he awoke, he found his wounds had only just begun to heal. Achingly, he pulled himself up from the ground.
You mean sleeping doesn't return you to
Gloomer was
full
on a
hit
rock
points?
ledge.
Okay. Well, let's examine our surroundings.
Gloomer attempted to see what was around him. His eyes were nearly sightless after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake, and could barely distinguish light from dark. He was on the ledge and hunched over on its muddy patch of rock in the air bubble cave. Gloomer could see the glow all around him. Everything else was dim and fuzzy to the nearly blind great rat. After countless seasons swimming beneath Cotir, Gloomer had felt every piece of his lake, but this cave was unfamiliar to the blind rat.
Well, let's touch walls.
Feeling around the sides of the air bubble cave, he felt a hard rock wall with many roots growing from it. One spot, though, was soft and spongy.
Examine spongy spot.
Gloomer attempted to see what was around him. His eyes were nearly sightless after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake, and could barely distinguish light from dark.
Whole spongy spot?
Gloomer snuffled and clawed as he dug with his paws into the dense material of the soft, spongy area. The savage had burrowed out a small tunnel opening. At the very tips of his claws, he felt a plug of material remain, further than his paws could reach. Gloomer sensed his salvation was near. But how to proceed? The great rat was stumped. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Examine dripping water?
Reaching up, Gloomer felt that the roof of the cave was moist and dripping
Okay.
water everywhere. Gloomer's paws were not long enough to reach any further into the tunnel. He surveyed his surroundings, mindlessly searching for something to extend his reach. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Feel around the ledge.
Gloomer ran his tattered paws around the floor. The solid rock was covered in mud, and the pool of water rested in the center of the cave. Feeling around the sides of the air bubble cave, he felt a hard rock wall with many roots growing from it. Gloomer felt a tunnel opening in the wall of the cave. Gloomer reached in the opening as far as he could with just his paw. At the tips of his claws, he felt a plug of material that remained further than his paws could reach. He could not push further, as the opening was slightly smaller than the bulk of the enormous great rat. Gloomer felt water dripping on him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Okay. Smell the air.
Gloomer smelt the lingering odors of snake and stormfin.
Okay.
Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Listen.
Gloomer had little hearing after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the Cotir Cavern Lake. He strained to listen, but his damaged ears rang internally with what sounded like the whine of an angry mosquito. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Gloomer has tinnitus. Okay. Well. Cry.
Hideous noises erupted from the insane great rat. It had no speech at all. With freedom just out of reach, the exhausted rat collapsed against the cave wall. The long roots jutting out from the wall dug into his back, forcing Gloomer back to his feet. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Salmon roots.
Gloomer attempted to see what was around him. His eyes were nearly sightless after years of swimming in the dark, murky waters of the lake, and could barely... The root in the wall was as long as his arm and springy. It felt a little like a carrot root, but more flexible.
Bite through roots.
Gloomer grabbed the longest root and gnawed on it until it came off in his paws. Oddly, the root tasted like a carrot, but was a bit more flexible. Again and again, the paranoid great rat checked to see that the root was still with him. Gloomer was on a rock ledge.
Okay, poke hole with root.
The evil great rat poked and dug deep into the material with the root. With a whoosh, the root was pulled from Gloomer's grip, going through the matted material into the empty space beyond. As the plug in the wall fell apart, the river moss, with all the speed of a hare warrior chasing vile vermin, flooded up into the previously sealed cave.
Uh-oh.
The water seized the bulk of the great rat and pressed him into the newly created tunnel. Suddenly, he stopped. His enormous body was too wide to go completely through it. Gloomer was stuck like a cork in a bottleneck. Behind him, the force of the river moss pushed on him, and in front of him was pure darkness.
Well, welcome to your nightmare fuel for today. Fear of drowning, fear of the dark, fear of being stuck. Poor Gloomer. Yeah, poor Gloomer. Okay. Dig walls?
Gloomer scratched wildly, but could not dig himself out of his predicament. Gloomer was trapped in the dark rock tunnel. His large hips were pressed by smooth rock with the force of the river moss at his back. The monstrous great rat was stuck like a cordial bottle cork. He was unable to lift his rear legs to allow his claws to get a purchase on the rock that had him in its grip. The great rat kicked with his legs and swiped with his paws, but all he grasped was the open air. Only his hips had contact with solid rock. Gloomer was trapped like a rat. Wait, he was a rat.
Well, let's see here. Dig with root.
Gloomer strained to reach the ledge, but he was too far away. Gloomer was trapped.
Swim out.
Gloomer was trapped in the dark rock tunnel. His large hips were pressed by smooth rock with the force of the river moss at his back. The monstrous great rat was stuck like a cordial bottle cork. He was unable to lift his rear legs to allow his claws to get
the rock?
Gloomer scratched wildly, but could not dig himself out of his predicament. Gloomer was trapped in the dark rock tunnel. His large hips...
Inventory.
Gloomer checked his belongings and found he was not carrying anything. The insane water rat could not force his huge form forward or backward. Fury boiled inside him, unable to free himself using his legs or paws. Gloomer was trapped.
Okay. White walls.
Gillig tasted the wall, but there was nothing unusual from its bitterness. Gloomer was trapped.
Trees. Smell walls.
Gloomer detected the scent of his lake beneath Cotir. Gloomer
Okay.
was trapped.
Listen.
Gloomer heard nothing special.
Oh yeah, because I've got tinnitus.
Was trapped.
And I'm blind. Feel walls.
Gloomer felt trapped in the dark rock tunnel. His sides were pressed by smooth rock, and the force of the river moss hit at his back. The monstrous great rat was stuck like a cork in a cordial bottle. He was unable to lift his rear legs to allow his claws to get a purchase on the rock that had him in its grip. Once, the great rat had tried to catch an eel. The oversized creature had wedged itself into a tunnel, and just before Gloomer could seize its bulk, the eel had twisted itself through the tight spot and escaped. Gloomer began to shake violently, attempting to mimic the movements of the eel. He felt himself loosen slightly from the grip of the walls. Gloomer was trapped.
Okay, so squirm.
Gloomer squirmed, shook, wiggled, jiggled, and twisted as best his bulk would allow. Roaring like an enraged badger, the great force of the river moss suddenly launched Gloomer down the winding dark tunnel. Minutes passed as his body tumbled, then shot like an arrow from a squirrel's bow, he was suddenly hurtling through the air. With a great splash, the giant landed into the familiar waters of the underground lake beneath Cotir Keep. Behind Gloomer, a new small waterfall had appeared in the wall of the cavern. Its waters fell down into the lake in an endless torrent. Gloomer surfaced with water dripping from his ugly bulk. His monstrous head had appeared from the depths like the worst kind of vision from a bad dream. As he inhaled deeply, his nostrils were filled with the scent of fresh meat. The killer rat mindlessly followed the scent and swam forward towards the smell of a live, tasty otter.
And within his mind, a badger lord became visible. He smiled as he spoke with the softness of winter's night, declaring that you have earned the achievement title of Daydream Crasher. Yep.
Within his mind, a badger lord became visible. He smiled as he spoke with the softness of a winter's night, declaring that you have earned the achievement title of Daydream Crasher.
And that is our latest picture. That's nice. Okay, let's start chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Oh my.
The Chase. Gillig the otter, relaxing peacefully on the surface of Cotir Cavern Lake, dreamily remembered. Skipper had given a good-natured chuckle and slapped a paw on Gillig's shoulder.
What we need is a mate who'll sneak into Cotir and retrieve Verduga's scroll, so we can show it to the Thousand Eyes troops. The war will end and there will be smooth sailing.
Gillig had found the otter's bunny burrow and ended up in Cotir Cavern all right, just with no way out at the moment, but at least he was here. Gillig's daydream was suddenly broken as he was tossed about by waves created by the new waterfall. He had looked up in dread to see the evil, monstrous Gloomer coming quickly. Gillig and Skipper hadn't counted on Gloomer being loose in the caverns. It all seemed so simple before. In his mind's ear, Gillig could almost hear what the balladeer Gonf would sing about this new predicament.
A 3-hour ruse, a 3-hour ruse. Well, things are truly getting rough, and the tiny otter is tossed. If not for the courage of this fearless one, this mission will be lost. This mission will be lost.
No.
The Gloomer crashed on the shore of this uncharted hidden lake, with Gilligan, no skipper too, a million cares, but he's wise. Now moving on with no rest, here in Gillig's exile.
Gillig saw the oncoming vile beast and knew he had to escape the Gloomer. Gillig was floating
That'll
in the
drop.
lake. The maddened water rat was making right for Gillig.
So yeah, that was the Gilligan's Isle theme. Now, maybe because I, wasn't exposed to the same kind of culture, I don't recall there being pop culture references in at least the Redwall books I read. Yeah, I know, game. I know. We're doing okay. Anyway, let's go to the Gloomer.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig was floating in the lake. Gillig's eyes widened in horror as he witnessed the oncoming Gloomer.
How about we hug? Can't figure out how to hug something. Please start your command with the action word. Talk to the Gloomer. Alright, did I already do that? Yeah.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig knew whichever way he chose to go, he had to get away quickly. Gillig was floating in the lake.
Swim away.
Gillig was blocked by Gloomer in most directions. He saw that perhaps he might be able to make it to the sandy beach. Gillig swam to the beach by the waterfall and ran out of the water.
Although theoretically, an otter would be better in water than a rat.
Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was on a sandy beach by the lake. There was a very large stalactite on its side, nestled deep within the sands. In front of him and across the lake, he saw a rocky shore against the wall of the cavern. The maddened water rat was making right for Gillig.
I mean, if it was on its side, it's no longer really a stalactite anymore. It's just rock. And it could have been a stalagmite, Now remember, stalactite comes down because it has to hold on tight. Even though you could say a stalagmite goes down because it has to be mighty, but whatever. Yeah, hi. Okay. Push. Just push stalactite. Oh.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. Gloomer raged towards the young otter, with claws at the ready and mouth agape.
Shoot rock at Gloomer with sling.
Sadly, Gillig had lost his sling in the tumble down the water slide and the fall into the lake.
How convenient.
Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. Gillig's eyes widened in horror as he witnessed the oncoming Gloomer.
Looks
Gillig
stalactite.
was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. Gillig was in such terror he was not able to take the time to look at his surroundings carefully. He would have to investigate after he got to someplace safe, if Gloomer did not catch him first.
Let's look around.
Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few
I'm
things.
stalactite.
Gillig was blocked by Gloomer in most directions. He thought he might be able to make it to the smooth, rocky shore. Gillig knew whichever way he chose to go, he had to get away quickly. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the water.
Run to shore?
Gillig swam to the smooth, rocky shore and made a dash out of the water, leaving a glowing wake that slowly faded into black behind him.
Well, the glowing
Gillig
wake, I
was in
think, is
terror
Terror
with
Peak.
the monstrous water rat
See,
bearing
there we
down
go.
at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was on a rocky shore by the lake. He saw a tall post and a closed gate with unlit stairs behind it going upward. In front of him and across the lake, he saw an island.
Okay.
The maddened water rat was making right for Gillig.
Run upstairs.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat.
Upstairs.
Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. Gillig was in such terror he was not able to take the time to look at his surroundings carefully. He would have to investigate after he got to someplace safe, if Gloomer did not catch him first.
Liftgate.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig was on the smooth rock shore of the lake. Charging straight for Gillig was the very angry Gloomer.
Yeah. Swim to island.
Gillig swam to the sandy island with a glowing wake left behind that soon went dark when he ran out of the water. Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was on the sandy island at the center of the lake. He saw a beehive laying near the shore. In front of him and across the water was a slimy shore.
Let's
The
throw the
maddened
bee.
water rat was making right for Gillig.
Throw a beehive at Gloomer.
Gillig could not throw the bees or the beehive at Gloomer while he was being chased. Gillig was on the island. Charging straight for Gillig was the very angry Gloomer.
Swim to
Gillig was
shore.
blocked by Gloomer in most directions. He considered he might be able to make it to the slimy shore. Gillig was on the island. Gillig quickly swam over to the slimy shore. Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was on a slimy shore by the lake. There were piles of carrion strewn about. In front of him and across the lake, he saw a jumble of rocks. As he
Let's take the
dodged the
rocks.
swiping claws of Gloomer, Gillig quickly scooped up a small stone. Gillig was on the slimy rocks by the lake. The mad
to the
Gillig
island?
was blocked by Gloomer in most directions. Perhaps he might be able to make it to the jumbles. Gillig was
Okay.
on the slimy rocks by the lake.
Let's go to the jumbles.
Gillig swam to the jumble of rocks, leaving a glowing wake which got noticeably darker over time. Then he climbed out of the water.
That is
Gillig was
definitely
in
the
terror
Terrapee
with the
stream.
monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was at the bottom of a jumble of rocks by the lake. The ascending rocks looked like they could be climbed easily.
Let's climb rocks.
Gillig climbed the rock jumble and reached its peak. Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was at the top of a jumble of rocks by the lake. There was a large rock leaning against the cave wall with a strange glow coming from behind it. On the other side of the jumbles from the slimy shore, he noticed a shallow area of the lake, beyond which was a ledge.
Push large rock.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig was at the top of the jumble of rocks. At the very top of the jumble of extremely large rocks, there was a large rock, no larger than himself, angled against the wall of the cave. He also noticed the strange glow coming from behind the rock.
Go behind the rock?
Gillig was blocked by Gloomer in most directions. He thought he might make it to the shallows. Gillig was at the top of the jumble of rocks. At the very top, he
Run to the
entered the shallows. The water was below his knees and swirled around his legs. Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was in the shallows of the lake. Across the water, he saw a ledge ascending against the cavern wall.
Let's go to the
Gillig
ledge.
swam to the ledge by the waterfall. As he pulled himself out from the water, he noticed he had left a trailing wake of glowing water that slowly grew dark. Gillig was in terror with the monstrous water rat bearing down at him. He only had a split second to look around and notice a few things. He was on a ledge on the wall of the cavern overlooking the lake. To one side, the ledge sloped down to the shallows, and to the other, the ledge continued behind the waterfall.
Well, let's go to the waterfall.
Gillig turned sideways, then sidled behind the waterfall.
Yay, sidling!
Gillig was on a thin shelf of rock behind the waterfall. In front of him, the waterfall was fascinating and glowing from phosphorescence. The downpour of water and mist made it difficult to see around him, but Gillig could still see the lake through the waterfall. The space was narrow on either side of him. One side led out to the sandy beach. The other side went up to a ledge that continued along the cavern wall before sloping down into the shallows. Gloomer was nowhere to be seen.
That's good. Also, okay, so yeah, apparently there are there's fungus in here that is phosphorescent, which I'm not a botanist, nor am I a fungologist, but in general, I think those glowy things are still kind of bad. Like, it's not radioactive, but pretty sure glowy mushrooms are not something you want to mess with, especially if you've been wandering around in a bunch of water and apparently are covered in glowy mushroom spores. I don't know. Well, let's see here. Let's go to Sandy Beach.
Gillig knew when he left the safety of the mists behind the waterfall, Gloomer would be able to smell him very quickly. Gillig realized that Skipper was not there to rescue him. The young otter was left to figure something out. Gillig was on a ledge behind the waterfall. He was facing the pouring fall, straining to see through the glows in the dense mists.
Up your fall?
Gillig noticed a rare and unusual sight, the backside of water. A badger lord appeared in his mind, his voice soft like the whisper of an owl's wingbeat in the night sky, proclaiming that you have earned the achievement title of Jungle Cruise Captain. Gillig
I don't think
was on
that's
a ledge
good.
behind the waterfall. He was facing the pouring fall, straining to see through the glows in the dense mists.
Okay. Also, apparently, yes, that is an achievement. Jungle Cruise Captain, examine waterfall from behind. Okay. There's actually a lot of achievements in this game. 50 achievements. I'm not getting them all. Let's take stock.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock. Gillig was on a ledge behind the waterfall. He was Gillig heard the waterfall in front of him and the echo of the waterfall, but could not quite make out where the echo was coming from. Gillig was on a ledge behind the waterfall. He was facing the pouring fall, straining to see through the glows in the dense mists.
Exits. Okay, look for exits. Go back.
Gillig knew when he left the safety of the mists behind the waterfall, Gloomer would be able to smell him very quickly. Trapped behind the safety of the waterfall, Gillig was left to sense his surroundings within the dense mists. Gillig knew when he left the safety of the mists behind the waterfall, Gloomer would be able to smell him very quickly. Gillig was on a ledge behind the waterfall. He was facing the pouring fall, straining to see through the glows in the dense mists.
Okay, I don't know.
Gillig remembered the crew always watching the backs of one another. An otter always needed to look out for what could be behind.
Look behind?
Gillig peered intently through the haze of phosphorescence. As he turned around, his eyes became focused on a tunnel entrance penetrating from the enveloping mist. Gillig was on a ledge behind the waterfall. He was facing the pouring fall, straining to see through the glows in the dense mists.
I'm not sure if it's still running, but if the is something behind the waterfall Twitter thing is still running, yes, there is in Escape the Gloomer. So go into tunnel.
Gillig stepped into the opening. With Gloomer nowhere in sight and darkness before him, he dropped to his knees, overcome by weariness. The young otter was breathing heavily, his eyes flashing anxiously, having barely escaped the Gloomer's claws. His mind began to transport him back to the shouts of the otter crew in an equally terrifying feeling not so long ago.
He let Stormfin get away.
Kick him out of the crew.
A disgrace to otter kind, he is.
That's enough. Next one who starts shouting will get none of me hot root punch till spring comes save ya, Skipper shouted. The yelling otters quieted instantly as he began to speak with full authority in his voice. Belay the gab and listen to me now. I'll be having a word with this'n. He slapped a heavy paw on Gillig's shoulder, nearly sending him head over rudder, before leading him away from the crew. A big, burly otter called Root stepped forward, stopping Skipper with a raised paw.
I saw the whole thing, Skip. The Dibben right froze as we were trying to wrangle the old pike. Finner nearly got snapped up.
and he spooked Stormfin off.
I said I'll be talking to it, Skipper insisted firmly, as Gillig stared down at his own feet.
This ain't the first time something like this has happened. Ruining your hot root punch is one thing, but this is Stormfin we're talking about now. What if that queen's got another water beast up her sleeve? What'll we do then?
Root retorted, with paws clenched and in his gruffest voice.
You've done nothing but train him up like your own. I've seen you stand by every mess he made, but the crew and I be thinking there needs to be more than a talking to this time.
Skipper's face was grim as he waved his muscular tail for silence. Aye, I'll handle it, Root. Now keep the crew calm while I do. Root looked reluctantly at Skipper, and finally nodded.
Aye, Skip.
Before Gillig could plead, he was led to Skipper's private quarters. The otter leader sighed heavily, running a tired paw over his whiskers. Listen well, me hearty. I can't keep defending you, not with this'n. You've passed the years of a dibbin'. 'Tis time you stand on your own two paws. Old Skip ain't taking care of it. Gillig shook and closed his eyes, as if trying to ward off the memory. He had let Skipper and the crew down for the last time.
Skipper believes in me, and I found another way to prove myself to the crew. I won't let him down again.
Looking into the tunnel, he spotted a pumice rock upon the floor before the rest was swallowed into darkness. He had to find the scroll, but first, he had to find a way to avoid Gloomer.
Oh, avoid the Noid. Well, first off, let's take pumice. We can use that to deal with any calluses on our paws.
He took a large piece of pumice. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Pumice on paws.
He went to rub something, but realized he was not able at the present moment. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Let's listen.
Gillig could hear the sound of the waterfall. Gillig took a deep breath and stared into the darkness. He remembered Skipper's words of encouragement when he felt afraid.
It'll take more than that to stop a freebooter like you. Keep moving onward.
Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Continue down tunnel.
Gillig walked into the darkness. Straining to see, nothing was visible, and the awful darkness was unbroken.
Okay, let's feel along the wall.
Gillig felt around the darkness. He felt his paws being covered in some sort of powder. Gillig's nose twitched at the strange odor that filled his nostrils.
Take powder?
It was too dark for Gillig to see anything to pick up.
Possibly they're, Saderia voltanes? Possibly. Smell area.
All Gillig could smell was the overwhelming rotten stench.
Great. Listen.
Gillig listened carefully, but heard nothing of interest. Strike pumice on powder. He went to hit something, but realized it would not do anything interesting. With no way to move forward, all Gillig could do was go back from where he came.
Go back.
Gillig found his way back into the waterfall tunnel. Gillig was in a tunnel with the waterfall behind him and darkness ahead. On the ground, he noticed some distinct yellow paw prints.
Okay. If that's sulfur, which it kind of sounds like it is, overwhelming rotten stench. Yes. Okay. So I've got pumice and I've got sulfur. Am I making gunpowder? Salmon paw
He
print.
looked at the yellow paw prints and saw they came from the dark end of the tunnel. With a sudden gasp of recognition, he realized they were exactly the same size as his own footpaws.
Yeah, they're
Gillig
yours.
was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Gillig completely stupid? I guess.
He went to hit something, but realized it would not do anything interesting. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall. Gillig looked closely at the pumice rock. It was grey in colour and full of many holes. It was certainly large enough to stand on, poorly rounded, and felt very light in his paws. Gillig noticed traces of yellow powder on the pumice.
Okay.
Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Okay. Strike stone on
Gillig
pumice?
smashed the rocks together and created more rubble. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Inventory.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a pumice rock. Gillig noticed traces of yellow powder on the pumice. Gillig noticed his paws were covered in a yellow powder. Gillig noticed his footpaws were covered in yellow powder. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Okay. Great.
All Gillig could smell was the overwhelming rotten stench. Gillig was in a
this is
tunnel
definitely
behind the
sulfur.
waterfall. He had an
Pause?
idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig thought about how he could keep the blind Gloomer from tracking by his scent when he recalled Skipper's brother, Mask, an otter who was one of the best spies in Mossflower and a master of disguises as well. He had once shared with Gillig a trick for hiding from predators by covering oneself in foul smells, not unlike the awful-smelling powder in the cave.
Okay.
Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Enter
Gillig
tunnel.
walked into the darkness. Straining to see, nothing was visible, and the awful darkness was unbroken.
Rub body and
He
powder.
went to rub something, but realized he was not able at the present moment. Gillig rolled around in the cave and felt himself being covered in a powdery substance.
Inventory.
Gillig looked to see what he was carrying, but it was too dark to make. Gillig found his way back into the waterfall tunnel. Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a pumice rock. Gillig noticed traces of yellow powder on the pumice. Gillig noticed he was covered in yellow powder. Gillig smelled himself. He could no longer smell his familiar otter scent. He wondered if this could help him out from his predicament. Gillig was in a tunnel behind the waterfall.
Exit waterfall.
Gillig walked onto the ledge behind the waterfall. Gillig was on a thin shelf of rock behind the waterfall. In front of him, the waterfall was fascinating and glowing from phosphorescence. The downpour of water and mist made it difficult to see around him, but Gillig could still see the lake through the waterfall. The space was narrow on either side of him. One side led out to the sandy beach. The other side went up to a ledge that continued along the cavern wall before sloping down into the shallows. Gloomer was nowhere to be seen.
Let's go to Sandy Beach.
Gillig walked to the sandy beach. Gillig looked all around and did not see Gloomer. It appeared his idea had worked. As long as he was covered in the foul-smelling sulphur, Gloomer would not be able to find him. It was time he sought out
could
the
find him
exits
better.
of the cave. He recalled the dark stairs behind the gate, but even more interesting to him was the glow coming from behind the rock atop the jumble of rocks. Gillig was on a large sandy beach by the waterfall on the edge of the lake. Lying on its side horizontally, half buried in the sand, close to the water's edge, Gillig saw what at first he thought was a log, but at second glance it appeared to be a very large, smooth stalactite that had broken off the ceiling.
Okay. So, there's a stalactite, waterfall. That's where the sulfur is. The bee's nest in the island in the middle. That's where the exit is. And down there is the food stuff. Okay, let's see if I can... push like that.
He had an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig stared in the direction of the lake. Somewhere within its depths, the Gloomer lurked, waiting to catch his scent the moment his disguise washed off. He recalled the intriguing glow behind the rock on top of the jumbles and thought about how to get there while staying dry. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. The stalactite was very large and about twice as big as Gillig. It was laying on its side, nestled firmly in the sands of the beach. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall.
Push stalactite.
The stalactite was very large and about twice as big as Gillig. It was laying on its side, nestled firmly in the sands of the beach. Since it was firmly nestled in the sand, he could not budge it if he wanted to. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. He had an idea, but he could not decide if that would be useful. So he tried to think of... Gillig was on a large sandy beach by the waterfall on the edge of the lake. Lying on its side horizontally, half buried in the sand, close to the water's edge, Gillig saw what at first he thought was a log, but at second glance it appeared to be a very large, smooth stalactite that had broken off the ceiling. He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall. Gillig returned to the jumbles. Gillig jumped from the ledge, landing firmly in the shallows, then hopped onto the jumbles of rocks. The smelly yellow powder was completely washed off. Gillig was near the top of a jumble of rocks which ascended against the cavern wall. Before him, he saw a glowing waterfall that provided light to the rest of the large cavern. To the left of the waterfall, a rocky ledge which hugged the cavern wall. Beside it lay a small, shallow stretch of water leading to the jumble of rocks. To the other side of the waterfall lay a sandy beach where a large object stuck in the sand caught Gillig's eye. To the right of the beach and across an expanse of water lay a large, smooth and rocky shore with a large post by the water's edge that ran up to the top of the cavern and out of sight. Beyond the post, the rocky shore rose upward, sloping high to where an iron gate rested. Through its bars, Gillig could make out a set of steps carved from the rock ascending upward to what must have been the castle above. There was a small sandy island in the middle of the lake. Beyond it and towards the back of the cavern, Gillig could see a mass of slimy rocks covered in heaps of carrion and a dark tunnel opening in the wall high above the carrion mounds. Roof holes were scattered about the ceiling, and water dripped into the lake from the hole Gillig had fallen through. At the very top of the jumble of extremely large rocks, there was a large rock, no larger than himself, angled against the wall of the cave. He also noticed the strange glow coming from behind the rock. Charging straight for Gillig was the very angry Gloomer.
Push large rock.
Gillig was running out of things to do with Gloomer so close, as he would surely be caught by the monstrous great rat. Gillig was at the top of the jumble of rocks. At the very top of the jumble of extremely large rocks, Gillig returned to the island. Gloomer's nose twitched in the air. His head snapped in Gillig's direction and began moving toward his prey. Gillig returned to the sandy beach. Along the way, he recovered himself in sulfur. He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall. Gillig was on a large sandy beach by the waterfall on the edge of the lake. Lying on its side horizontally, half buried in the sand, close to the water's edge, Gillig saw what at first he thought was a log, but at second glance it appeared to be a very large, smooth stalactite that had broken off the ceiling.
Okay.
He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall.
Yeah, I know that, but apparently if I go there, all the sulfur comes off, and I'm effed.
The stalactite was very large and about twice as big as Gillig. It was laying on its side, nestled firmly in the sands of the beach.
Dig under
He dug a
stalactite?
hole under the stalactite, tunneling from one side to the other. He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. The stalactite was very large and about twice as big as Gillig. It was laying on its side, nestled firmly in the sands of the beach. Since he was at the stalactite, lying in the sand, he recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall.
Swipe to refuse.
Gillig had a thought, but he had no idea how to do it. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall. Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a pumice rock. Gillig noticed traces of yellow powder on the pumice. Gillig noticed he was covered in yellow powder. He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall.
Pumice are jumbles?
He had an idea, but he could not decide if that would be useful, so he tried to think of a different way to do it. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall.
Oh. Okay. So what do I do? Throw baby in lake. Oh, wait. Throw pumice in lake.
He tossed the light pumice rock into the lake and watched in disappointment as the current brought the rock back to shore. He recalled the jumbles that were just past the shallows that were next to the ledge by the waterfall. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach by the waterfall.
Okay. Take pumice.
He took a large piece of pumice. Gillig was on the lake's large sandy beach. Gillig walked onto the ledge beside the waterfall. The gap between the ledge and the jumble of rocks was so great that only a beast with powerful legs like a hare's could cross it in a single bound. Eyeing the gap, Gillig figured he could jump only half that distance. Gillig was on a ledge overlooking the lake. There was a visible island surrounded by a lake in the distance. The ledge continued along the cavern wall, sloping down into the shallows, which spanned to the jumble of rocks. The other end of the ledge led to a thin shelf of rock behind the waterfall.
So apparently I'm supposed to throw pumice in the water.
He threw the
here.
pumice rock into the shallows. It landed with a splash halfway between the shallows and jumble of rocks. In the shallow water, Gillig could make out the top of the pumice rock sticking out. With a mighty leap, he jumped to the pumice rock in the middle of the shallows. He was standing on the pumice in the middle of the shallows between the waterfall ledge and the jumble of rocks. He jumped from the pumice rock in the shallows onto the jumble of rocks. Next to the lake, a jumble of rocks ascended against the cavern wall, with Gillig near the bottom. Following the cavern wall was a shallow area of water that led to the ledge by the waterfall.
And finally, push large rock.
He had an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. Gillig was on the jumble of rocks by the lake. Gillig climbed the rock jumble and reached its peak. Gillig was near the top of a jumble of rocks which ascended against the cavern wall. Before him, he saw a glowing waterfall that provided light to the rest of the large cavern. To the left of the waterfall, a rocky ledge which hugged the cavern wall. Beside it lay a small, shallow stretch of water leading to the jumble of rocks. To the other side of the waterfall lay a sandy beach where a large object stuck in the sand caught Gillig's eye. To the right of the beach and across an expanse of water lay a large, smooth and rocky shore with a large post by the water's edge that ran up to the top of the cavern and out of sight.
Sorry,
Beyond
we can't
post,
score here,
the rocky
Bruffin.
shore
This
rose
is
sloping
child's
high
game.
to where an iron gate rested. Through its bars, Gillig could make out a set of steps carved from the rock ascending upward to what must have been the castle above. There was a small sandy island in the middle of the lake. Beyond it and towards the back of the cavern, Gillig could see a mass of slimy rocks covered in heaps of carrion and a dark tunnel opening in the wall high above the carrion mounds. Roof holes were scattered about the ceiling, and water dripped into the lake from the hole.
Oh, definitely Seth.
Through. At the very top of the jumble of extremely large
On the bright
rocks,
side, we can't smell anything because all we're smelling is sulfur.
Rock, no larger than himself, angled against the wall.
Which I don't think
cave.
is any better.
He also noticed the strange glow coming from behind the rock.
Push large rock.
He pushed
Human
the
lock.
rock
Amateurs
away,
count.
and it tumbled into the jumbles, exposing a small opening in the cavern wall. Gillig looked down to see he had uncovered a small tunnel. A strange warm glow poured out from it onto the jumbled rocks below his paws. He bent low to peer inside at what he had uncovered. Within his mind, a badger lord became visible. He smiled as he spoke with the softness of a winter's night, declaring that you have earned the achievement title of Amateur Scout.
Great. Well, let's start chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Cordial shows the way.
Am I getting drunk?
The glow from the small opening illuminated the top of the rocks. Gillig, masked by the sulphur, did not see Gloomer lurking about. Now was his chance to figure out a way to get out of the cavern. Just as he was gathering his senses, Gillig began to feel the pangs of hunger gnawing at him.
No.
Gillig was at the top of the jumble of rocks. He noticed a small opening in the rock wall.
And that's us looking very dumbfounded. And that's our earlier map. Okay. Rub belly.
He went to rub something, but realized he was not able at the present moment. Gillig wondered what might be at the end of the opening he had uncovered in the rock. Gillig was at the top of the jumble of rocks. Glancing around, he saw a small opening in the rock wall.
Enter opening.
He bent over onto his paws and crawled into the small opening. He could feel its walls squeezing him as he wriggled his way through. As Gillig
Wiggle,
crawled
wiggle.
into the small tunnel, his body rubbed against the wet walls. The sulphur came off his fur in the process. He was in a small wet crawl tunnel. From one end was the top of the jumble of rocks where he could see the Gloomer was now waiting for him. Fortunately, being a young otter, his hips were much smaller than Gloomer's, but he could no longer leave that way. From the other end of the tunnel was a strange glow.
Gloomer's got some junk in the trunk. Salmon glow. Oh, is this the glow? Will I be able to defeat Shonuff, the Shogun of Harlem? No, I don't think I will be. I am definitely no Bruce Leroy. Salmon glow.
Gillig saw a glow ahead. He was unsure what he might find should he continue forward. Gillig was
Okay.
in a small tunnel.
Continue forward.
Gillig slowly crawled towards the glow before him. The young otter stood up and stopped in awe, completely dumbstruck by what he saw.
It is not dark. It is the opposite of dark. There is glowy. Okay, and he saw what? Look at cause of being dumbstruck. Salmon
When
glow.
he examined the walls closely, he saw the aurora was coming from glowworms, which are wiggling around and changing colors as they moved about the walls and roof of the cave.
Oh, yeah. Possibly in Skippy's Scream, they were referring to, the movie The Last Dragon. Benny Gordo's, I think, The Last Dragon, not to be confused with Raya and the Last Dragon, or many other films with the title Last Dragon. Okay, so, get worms. I don't think an otter wants worms. Most dogs don't want worms. I don't want worms, but we're getting worms.
Gillig grabbed a pawful of glowworms. They began to wiggle out from his grasp, and if something was not done quickly, they would soon all escape.
Oh.
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock. Gillig looked about, amazed by what surrounded him.
Okay. Look around.
Gillig was in a
Oh.
large, glowing cave, his mouth gaping in wonderment. The rock walls were twinkling and blinking like stars in the night sky. Small moving lights flittered in waves over the cave walls, and glowing tendrils hung down from the ceiling above. The low glow lit the cave just enough for Gillig to see a mushroom forest that expanded around him to the cave's walls. Glancing around, he saw a small opening in the rock wall, a dark tunnel.
So, yeah. I think we are what's referred to as tripping balls. Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely the look of an otter who has inhaled a few too many mushroom spores and now is... I don't think this otter is in Redwall anymore. Yeah. I think Gillig here very much is bit of a space cadet. But let's smell those mushrooms.
Gillig smelled the delightful scent of fresh mushrooms, but his nose twitched as he picked up on something dangerous as well. Gillig was in the mushroom cave. Gillig listened carefully, but heard nothing of interest. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Look at surroundings.
Gillig was in a large, glowing cave, his mouth gaping in wonderment. The rock walls were twinkling and blinking like stars in the night sky. Small moving lights flittered in waves over the cave walls, and glowing tendrils hung down from the ceiling above. The low glow lit the cave just enough for Gillig to see a mushroom forest that expanded around him to the cave's walls.
Examine mushrooms.
There were many mushrooms in the cavern. Some were as large as small trees, others as small as a dibbon's nose. There were large and freshly fallen dried mushroom logs littered on the cave floor. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Take logs.
He picked up a mushroom log. Although it was very large, it was surprisingly light. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Okay. Take
Gillig
mushrooms.
picked a good-looking mushroom from the earth. A long sniff at its marvelous smell determined it was safe enough to eat, and so he did, happily appeasing his rumbling stomach for the moment. Other mushrooms were growing near some dull leaden rocks that smelled odd. He avoided them completely.
Oh, mushrooms are good, Seth. But, like...
Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Unless you know your fungi, I wouldn't just, like, wander around and be like, hey, you sound awesome. Yum, 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 yum. Oh. Gillig has only hours to live. So what do I got?
Gillig checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a mushroom log. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Okay. Let's see here. Guess I could return. When you say tunnel, do you mean the small opening in the rock wall? Yes?
He wanted to go in the crawl tunnel, but could not do it while carrying the large log. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Push the log through a tunnel? Yes.
He had an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything. The dark tunnel nearby seemed ominous. It made Gillig anxious, but it pulled at his curiosity.
What they mean is
Gillig
like
was in the mushroom cave.
One of these mushroom stalks that was from one of the burst mushrooms, I guess. Okay. Look, exits.
He wanted to look at something, but it was either not visible to him, or he could not find anything about it. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Probably.
Gillig picked a good-looking mushroom from the earth. A long sniff at its marvelous smell determined it was safe enough to eat, and so he did, happily appeasing his rumbling stomach for the moment.
Let's look at
Gillig
rocks.
closely examined the rock, finding it to be nothing but a smooth stone. He tucked it away, disappointed it had not been flint. If it were, he could have used it to strike a fire for his torch. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a torch, and I don't have a piece of steel or iron, so... yeah. Salmon
The
log.
mushroom log was twice as tall as Gillig, and dried out. He lifted it a little with his paws, and although it was solid, it appeared very light. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
No. Sure.
Gillig looked at the dark tunnel opening, and saw it was large enough for him to walk through.
Oh.
Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Oh, dark
He was in front of a dark tunnel. The only thing that remained was to enter it. Gillig recalled finding the fire-starting kit in the dark of the Holt, and wondered what he may find in the dark tunnel beyond the mushroom forest. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Okay, so enter dark tunnel.
He walked into the dark tunnel. Straining to see, nothing was visible, and the awful darkness was unbroken.
Touch ground.
Through sense of touch, Gillig investigated the darkness and picked up something he found. He
Yay.
planned to check his belongings later. He felt around within the darkness. His paws waved openly in the space, discovering a yawning pit in the floor that spanned from wall to wall.
Oh.
Reaching into the pit, it seemed very deep, and the sides were so smooth and slippery that they could not be scaled.
Push mushroom log in the pit.
He had an idea, but decided that would not accomplish anything.
Okay, let's
He
leave.
made his way back to the glowing mushroom cave. Gillig was in a large glowing cave, his mouth gaping in wonderment.
Take our
Gillig
inventory.
checked his belongings and noted he was carrying a small, smooth rock, a cordial bottle, a mushroom log. Realizing it was too dark in the tunnel, Gillig knew he had to find a source of light if he were to proceed.
Same
It was a
bottle.
woodlander's square cordial bottle, built with stoppers secured to it. The bottle was full of some sort of clear liquid. Gillig was in the mushroom
Bottle.
cave. He opened and closed the cordial bottle. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
I just want to open it.
He opened and closed the cordial bottle. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Smell the bottle.
Slowly opening the bottle, Gillig smelt the beautiful aroma of delightful dandelion cordial all around him. Gillig recalled the pulsing glows on the walls around the mushroom cave. He considered examining them to see what was causing the light. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Let's do something stupid. Let's drink the bottle.
Dandelion cordial was a favoured drink of Gillig. He hummed before he gulped it down, its delightful flavour of sweetness complemented by the bitter and nutty post-taste.
It's a bit
Finishing
nutty.
it off, he was reminded of the batches his mother used to make, and feelings of gratefulness welled in him.
We get drunk.
Within his mind, a badger lord became visible. He smiled as he spoke with the softness of a winter's night, declaring that you have earned the achievement title of Bottoms Up. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Now, typically, cordials are non-alcoholic or very low alcoholic. That said, something that's been here to ferment for God knows how long. I'm wondering if this thing earned some potency. But anyway, let's put glowing mushrooms in the bottle.
He had an idea, but he could not decide if that would be useful, so he tried to think of a different way to do it. Gillig was in the mushroom cave. The mushroom log was twice as tall as Gillig and dried out. He lifted it a little.
Look around.
Gillig was in a large, glowing cave, his mouth gaping in wonderment. The rock walls were twinkling and blinking like stars in the night sky. Small moving lights flittered in waves over the cave walls, and glowing tendrils hung down from the ceiling above. The low glow lit the cave just enough for Gillig to see
know
a
what I
mushroom
need to do.
forest that expanded around him to the cave's walls. He saw a small opening in the rock wall, a dark tunnel.
Put glowworms in
He
bottle.
put worms in the bottle and quickly closed the stopper before they had a chance to escape. The bottle glowed brightly, providing light. Now, with light in paw, Gillig could enter the dark tunnel. Gillig was in the mushroom cave.
Go into dark tunnel.
He walked into the dark tunnel.
Yeah, pretty much.
He was in a dark tunnel in the mushroom cave that sloped down to a deep crevice in the floor, which spanned from one wall to the other. The tunnel continued ascending upward across the gaping hole.
Okay. Salmon hole.
Gillig shook his head despairingly as he peered into the crevice. It seemed bottomless, completely encased in black. The sides were slick and treacherous. Gillig knew that there had to be something across the crevice, but how could he get across? He was in the dark tunnel.
Put log across crevice.
He placed the mushroom log across the crevice, the log barely fitting the gaping hole. Gillig hesitantly put his foot on the log, testing its strength. He then solidly put his paw down and found it would hold his weight. He was in the dark tunnel.
I mean, I guess that would be better than if the log was too big to fit the gaping hole. Anyway, go across log.
Gillig carefully crossed the mushroom log and reached the other side. He was in a long, upward-sloping tunnel. At the lowest point was the deep crevice he had crossed over, and its ultimate end was hidden by the ascending curve. The tunnel was tall enough that Gillig could go up without worry of bumping his head. There was a mushroom log spanning the crevice.
Okay, well then let's go up tunnel.
He walked up the long ascending tunnel that curved like a spiral staircase. He stopped as he entered into a large cave. He was in a large storage cavern filled with rows upon rows of shelving that went all around the room. Set securely in the wall of the cavern was a locked ancient door. He saw the crevice tunnel through which he had entered.
Examine the shelves.
The structure of the cave provided tiered shelves in the walls. The bottom shelf was at Gillig's knee, with an open gap to the floor underneath. Gillig thought it a wise system to keep their contents safe off the floor. The top shelves were in reach, all placed slightly below the level of his eyes. Whomever had built the area must have been a bit shorter than an otter. The shelves were piled high with a large mixture of tasty-looking dried mushrooms and strange-looking carrot-like roots. He was in a large storage cave lined with shelves.
Let's take some roots.
He grabbed some of the dried roots and mushrooms. He was in a large storage cave lined with shelves.
Okay. So this is a food air pantry, although it's got a locked door.
The closed door had no outstanding features about it. It was very ancient, but completely firm and solid. He was in a large storage cave. Gillig could not open the locked ancient door. Gillig hoped there was another way out. Rabbits were known for having many exits. He was in a large storage cave lined with shelves.
No, rabbits just have the one. Oh, this I should not be playing this game. Yes, yes. Right. Okay. Examine shelves more.
The structure of the cave provided tiered shelves in the walls. The bottom shelf was at Gillig's knee, with an open gap to the floor underneath. Gillig thought it a wise system to keep their contents safe off the floor. The top shelves, Gillig climbed the shelves in the storage cavern, and then climbed back down. A badger lord suddenly manifested in his thoughts, as if some sort of dreamlike state. He spoke ever so softly, and declared that you have earned the achievement title of Step Stool Optional. He was in a large storage cave, lined with shelves.
Okay, well. Huh. Well, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm thinking I'm probably going to call it here since I'm at my usual 2-hour mark. Yeah, next week I'm definitely going to continue this. I got to see the end of this. This is great. This is terrible, but it's great. But yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I knew I had to hold a guide to get through bureaucracy. And this game seems like I'm trying not to. I'm legit trying not to. The only time I looked up anything was the stupid pumice stone, island hop thing. But yeah. This should be fun. But that'll be for another time. When we come back, folks, I guess we still have to escape the Gloomer. Have a good one.